Oh, that's actually perfect, my sister announced, her voice carrying easily over the soft jazz and the clink of crystal filling Maple and Stone's main dining room. She was speaking to the maitre d', but her eyes were locked directly on me with the particular brightness she got when she'd arranged something cruel in advance. She glanced at the man standing behind my left shoulder. Plain navy Henley, dark jeans, clean leather boots, and her smile sharpened. Put them near the service door. They'll be out of the way back there. More comfortable, I'm sure. The room had gone just quiet enough that the nearest guests caught every word. I was 29 years old, standing at the entrance of one of Yorkville's most exclusive private dining rooms, and my sister still had the precise, unerring ability to make me feel like I'd wandered into the wrong building. The man behind my shoulder said nothing. He simply looked at my sister with an expression I had come to recognize over 8 months of knowing him. Politely neutral. The way someone looks when they've decided a conversation isn't worth engaging with, but are paying very close attention anyway. My name is Phoebe. I'm a UX designer. I bike to client meetings, go to the Evergreen Brickworks Market most Saturdays, and genuinely do not care about the things my sister has built her entire identity around. My sister, Genevieve, 3 years older, always the one with better posture in family photos, had married my brother-in-law 2 years ago, a man who had introduced himself at their engagement party as primarily in private wealth management and commercial real estate development. He had, as far as I could tell, never once said anything specific about anything since. My brother-in-law was the kind of man who wore a different Swiss watch every week. The kind who name-dropped Bay Street firms, the way other people mention the weather, who had a condo in Yorkville and a second property in Muskoka, and a habit of subtly redirecting every family dinner back toward his own expertise. He described his work as capital markets and high-value asset acquisition. I had privately suspected for a while that several layers of carefully arranged debt had been made to look like wealth, but I had never said this to anyone. It wasn't at my place. And for 2 full years, I had done what I always did with my sister. Showed up, swallowed whatever discomfort I felt, and tried to be present without becoming a problem. The birthday dinner was supposed to be my chance to show up properly. My sister had texted me 3 weeks earlier, not called, texted, to say she was doing an intimate dinner for 30 at Maple and Stone, private dining room, black tie adjacent. Bring someone if you'd like. I was grateful for the inclusion. I was genuinely looking forward to it. I should have read the subtext more carefully. The first sign came when I called the restaurant to confirm, and the reservations coordinator told me my name wasn't on the list for the private room. There was a note. Phoebe, general dining, street level. Not the private room. General seating, as though I were someone who had wandered in off Bloor Street on the same night as my own sister's birthday party. I called my sister. She didn't answer. I texted. She replied 4 hours later. Sorry, the private room was technically full, but you can still come. They'll find you something, somewhere X. That somewhere, as it turned out, was a 2-top table pushed against the service corridor, close enough to the kitchen pass-through that I could hear the expeditor calling orders, far enough from the private dining room that my sister's laughter reached me only in fragments between the clatter of stacked plates. I should have left. I know that now. But the man I had invited was already driving in from Waterloo, 3 hours round trip, because I had mentioned it was my sister's birthday and I didn't want to walk in alone. He had texted me from the parking garage. Here. Spent 20 minutes looking for parking. This city, I swear. I had smiled at my phone in a way that probably looked completely unhinged to anyone passing by. His name was Reed. He worked in finance. That was how I would have described him at the time, and that description would have been roughly as accurate as calling the CN Tower a tall building. We had met 8 months earlier at a community board meeting about a proposed development in the Junction neighborhood. I was there representing a local arts organization that used one of the affected buildings. He was there for reasons he was vague about. We ended up talking for 2 hours after the meeting ended, out on the sidewalk in the October cold, and I missed my streetcar twice without noticing. He was quiet in the way that felt like depth rather than distance. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He had a worn canvas jacket and drove a 12-year-old Subaru Legacy and had, in 8 months of knowing him, never once volunteered his job title, his firm's name, or anything about his net worth. I had not thought to ask in detail. I knew he worked at something called Meridian North Capital. I knew he traveled a lot for work. I knew he had strong opinions about municipal zoning policy and made very good coffee. That was the full picture I was operating with when I asked him to come. He came. He arrived in the navy Henley and dark jeans, understated, tidy, entirely wrong for what my sister had orchestrated. I watched her take him in the moment we stepped through the door. The quick scan from boots to collar, the small recalibration in her expression, and then the decision forming clearly behind her eyes before a single word left her mouth. Oh, that's actually perfect. The maitre, a tall, composed man named Gilles, who had greeted every other arriving guest with genuine warmth and offered to take their coats, nodded smoothly at my sister's direction and began moving toward us. He was mid-step when he stopped. He was looking at Reed. I don't know exactly what passed across Gilles' face in that moment. It wasn't alarm. It was more a specific recalibration, the precise, quiet adjustment of someone who has just realized the shape of the room has changed without warning. He stood still for a breath, then walked directly past me and extended his hand. Mr. Calloway. His voice was low and warm, not performative. I apologize. I had no idea you'd be joining us tonight. Please, if I'd known. We're with the Hargreave party, Reed said, easy and unhurried, nodding toward the private room. There were some table arrangements, apparently. There's absolutely no issue, Gilles said, already turning. Not at all. We have the Beaumont table available, our best corner in the main room, full view of the garden terrace. I'll have it set immediately. He paused. Can I take your jacket? My sister had gone still in the doorway of her private room. I watched her process it. The man she had directed toward the service corridor. The man she had assessed as furniture, as background, as my awkward +1 in the wrong clothes, being addressed by name by the most senior member of staff in the building, and offered the best table in the house. Her smile had not yet disappeared, but it had developed a hairline fracture. Gilles, she said, stepping forward in her smoothest tone. That's very kind, but really, there's no need to rearrange on our account. It's no trouble at all, Gilles said, with a finality that was entirely courteous and entirely immovable. We were seated at the corner table, candle already lit. Garden terrace visible through the full-length window, the October lights strung between the trees. A clear sight line, incidentally, into the private dining room where 30 of my sister's carefully curated guests had begun to look our way. I picked up my menu. My hands were steadier than I expected. Reed sat across from me and said, "You okay?" "Yes," looked up. "What was that?" "What was what?" "Gilles, the way he knew you." Reed turned his water glass slightly on the tablecloth. "I've eaten here a few times." I looked at him. "People eat here 100 times. Gilles doesn't remember names unless there's a reason." He considered the menu. "How's the duck? I've always had the beef." I let it go, for approximately 14 minutes. Then my brother-in-law appeared. He had been doing his usual circuit of the private room, moving from group to group, hands in motion, performing the specific social labor of a man who needed every person in the building to think well of him. I had watched him do this at every family gathering for 2 years. The confident stride, the practiced laugh, the way he touched other men's shoulders as though conferring something valuable. He was midway through the doorway between the private room and the main dining area, champagne flute in hand, when his eyes found our table. More specifically, when his eyes found Reed. I have replayed this moment often, the way confidence drained from his posture so completely, so fast, that it was almost structural, like watching something accept gravity. His face went the color of old newsprint. His grip on the champagne flute turned rigid. He did not drop the glass, but his hand stopped moving entirely. He walked across the dining room toward us, the way a person walks when they are trying very hard to appear unhurried and are failing at it thoroughly. His eyes didn't leave Reed for a second. Reed watched him come with the same measured expression he'd had since we arrived. "Mr. Calloway." My brother-in-law's voice came out rough at the edges, like something cut too quickly from a larger shape. He stopped at our table, swallowed once. I didn't realize you'd be here. I didn't know. Genevieve didn't mention." "She didn't know," Reed said simply. My sister had materialized behind her husband. She looked between the two men with the expression of someone trying to enter a conversation that started without them and isn't going well. "Alistair." Her voice had that particular sharpening it got when she was about to redirect a situation. "Who is this?" He turned to her, and what I saw on his face then was not embarrassment. It was not the social discomfort of being caught behaving badly. It was fear, real, unmanaged, the kind you cannot perform or redirect. "This is Reed Calloway," he said. The sentence came out very quietly. "He's the founding managing partner of Meridian North Capital." My sister stared. "Meridian North," she repeated, as though testing whether the name would mean something if she said it aloud. "They hold the institutional funding agreement for my firm." My brother-in-law was looking at Reed now, not at her. "Operating capital, bridge financing. The entire facility that keeps everything running." He stopped. "Everything." The table adjacent to ours had gone very still. The couple seated there had turned slightly, in the way that signals full attention, beneath the surface of looking elsewhere. My brother-in-law pulled out the empty chair beside our table, not sitting, just standing behind it, both hands on the back, and lowered his voice further. "Mr. Calloway, if this is about the extension request, I can walk you through the Q3 projections personally. We flagged the cash flow variance in the quarterly filing. We were completely transparent with the documentation sent to your office." "Alistair." Reed's voice was even. Not cold, not warm. Measured in a way that landed harder than either. "You've submitted 3 consecutive extension requests on the bridge facility in the past 18 months. The last one cited operational restructuring due to cash constraints." My brother-in-law said nothing. A muscle worked in his jaw. "The brokerage license renewal application filed with FSRA last month," Reed continued, "references stable capital positions and consistent asset valuations across the same portfolio." "Those are different disclosure instruments," my brother-in-law said, and his voice had gone very thin. "Different regulatory contexts. The extension requests are internal communications. They reference the same properties," Reed said, "the same valuations, the same asset base." The couple at the next table had stopped pretending entirely. "We can discuss this through proper channels." My brother-in-law's voice cracked slightly at the seam. "Monday morning, through counsel. I'll have someone reach out to your office first thing. We can get the documentation." "My compliance team will be in contact with theirs on Monday," Reed said, "and likely with the relevant parties at FSRO." He picked up his water glass. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." My brother-in-law stood behind the chair for a moment longer. His hands released the back of it, slowly. He turned and walked back into the private dining room without looking at my sister, and he did not look back at us, and the private room went quiet enough that I could hear someone set down a fork. My sister stood at our table a moment longer. She looked at me, really looked at me for perhaps the first time that whole evening, perhaps for longer than that. And her expression was something I had never seen from her before. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something that looked uncomfortably close to the recognition, the reluctant kind that arrives when it's too late to be useful. She didn't speak. She turned and followed her husband back into the private room. I sat at the best corner table in maple and stone and looked at the candle and breathed carefully and didn't say anything for what felt like a long time. "You knew who he was," I said finally. Reed looked at me steadily. "You knew before you came tonight," I said. "You knew there was a connection." He didn't insult me by pretending not to understand what I was asking. "I've been aware of your brother-in-law's firm for several months," he said. "Some of the filing inconsistencies came through our review process. Nothing I could act on socially. It's a regulatory matter, not something appropriate to raise at a dinner table." He paused. But he raised it. At the dinner table. His hands rested flat on the tablecloth. "I'm sorry tonight went the way it did. I hoped it would just be a birthday dinner." I thought about this for a while. The waiter came, and I ordered the duck without really reading the description. I thought about 2 years of showing up to family events and being an afterthought dressed up as an invitation. About swallowing things down until they sat somewhere in my chest like a stone that never quite dissolved. About the text that said they'd find me somewhere. And the meaning behind that word that I had chosen not to examine too closely. We had dinner. Reed had the beef, as he'd predicted. Gilles sent out an amuse-bouche we hadn't ordered. We talked about whether the Junction development had actually improved the neighborhood, and whether the Saturday market at Evergreen would run through November this year, and an extremely long argument about which route through the DVP was less terrible at rush hour. That somehow lasted until the dessert menu arrived. Normal things, real things. The private dining room stayed quiet for the rest of the night. The situation with my brother-in-law's firm came apart the way things do when they've been held together with creative paperwork instead of actual capital. Gradually, and then entirely at once. FSRA opened a formal review into the brokerage license discrepancies in November. Meridian North withdrew from the funding agreement by December, citing material misrepresentation in the extension requests. 2 of the commercial properties my brother-in-law had carried as stable assets turned out to be leveraged at ratios that collapsed under scrutiny. By February, the firm had been formally wound down. His brokerage license was suspended pending the outcome of the regulatory review. The Yorkville condo sold first. The Muskoka property took longer. My sister moved into a rental in Etobicoke, a neighborhood she had described to me at a family dinner 14 months earlier as not really somewhere we'd see ourselves. My mother told me all of this in the careful, measured way she delivers difficult news. With the slight surprise she always has when I don't react with more visible satisfaction. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt tired. The particular tiredness that comes from wanting something to be different for a very long time, and eventually having to accept that it was always going to be exactly this way. That the person you wanted to be your sister had never quite been available. We speak occasionally now, my sister and I. She has not apologized for the dining room, not in any direct way. About 6 months after everything came apart, she called me on a Wednesday afternoon and talked for 20 minutes about logistics. The rental deposit, the timeline for getting things sorted, what she was figuring out day by day. And then, right at the end of the call, in a voice that had gone very quiet and careful, she said, "You've always been more steady than me. I don't think I ever told you that." She didn't say anything else. I didn't push her toward more. Some things have to come out in small pieces, or they don't come out at all. Reed keeps his worn canvas jacket in the closet by my front door. He has a standing order at the coffee place on Dundas West. I've been going to every weekend for 3 years. The owner knows his name now, which Reed seems genuinely baffled by every time. Last month, we drove out to Elora for a long weekend, and I made the sandwiches, and he drove, and we spent a full hour arguing about which podcast to listen to before deciding on neither and just talking instead. He still drives the 12-year-old Subaru. He still does not own a Swiss watch, as far as I know. I have thought about that dining room many times. About my sister's voice carrying over the jazz, directing us toward the service corridor, with the calm certainty of someone who has never once examined the assumptions underneath it. About my brother-in-law's hands gripping the back of that chair, about the way the room reassembled its understanding of who mattered and who didn't in the span of about 4 minutes. Here's what I have come to understand. My sister didn't seat me poorly that night, because she thought I was less. She did it because some part of her was afraid I might turn out to be more. The golden child's fear is never the overlooked one's failure. It is the moment the overlooked one stops, needing the golden child's opinion to know their own worth. I had stopped needing it a long time ago. I just hadn't quite found the right table to demonstrate it from. The things people use to measure each other. The right postal code, the right title, the right watch. They are such a fragile currency. They feel solid until the quarterly filings land on the wrong desk. They look like permanence until someone picks up the phone on a Monday morning. I sat near the service corridor in a Yorkville restaurant and watched a room recalibrate around me. And the only thing I thought, with Reed across the table and the garden lights visible through the window, was that none of it had ever actually been about me at all. Some people mistake quiet for empty. They do it because it makes them feel better about all the noise they make. The duck was very good. The garden was lit up beautifully, and I walked out of that restaurant without owing a single person in it an explanation. That was enough. It had always been enough.